In 16th century Japan, the rules were simple. If you were born a peasant, you died a peasant. If you were born a samurai, well, you were born to rule. It was a rigid world. But then one man comes along and just shatters that reality. He rises from the absolute lowest rung of society to become its master. So let's dive into the incredible, almost unbelievable story of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And this is the man himself. Take a look at this portrait. This is the very picture of power and authority, right? He would go on to become one of the most important figures in all of Japanese history, the second of Japan's three great unifiers. And when I say power, I mean real power. We're talking about command of armies hundreds of thousands strong. He was the one who built the magnificent Osaka Castle, one of the greatest fortresses in the entire country. And he managed to get the highest titles you could possibly hold in the imperial court, making him the ruler of Japan in everything but name. So that brings up a really fascinating question, doesn't it? With all this accomplishment, all this power, why on earth did his first great lord, the legendary Oda Nobunaga, give him the nickname Kosaru, which means little monkey? Well, the answer to that takes us right back to his unbelievable origins. So let's start there. This is part one of his story, an absolutely impossible rise from carrying a lord's sandals to wielding his own sword. Hideyoshi was born in 1537 with absolutely nothing going for him. Seriously, he had zero samurai blood. His dad was an ashigaru, basically a peasant foot soldier, and he died when Hideyoshi was just 7 years old. So here you have this kid with no name, no status, and no future who decides to ditch temple life and just seek his fortune in the middle of a war-torn country. And what a fortune he found. I mean, just look at this timeline of his rise. It's wild. In 1558, he's a nobody in the Oda clan. A few years later, his sheer intelligence and charisma get him noticed, and he becomes the personal sandal bearer for the fearsome warlord Oda Nobunaga. From there, it's just like a rocket ship. By 1573, he's a daimyo, a feudal lord with his own land. And by 1582, he's one of Nobunaga's top generals. In just over 2 decades, he went from servant to commander. It's insane. This print right here, this shows one of his big breakout moments. During the siege of Inabayama Castle, the story goes that he found a secret way up the mountain and built a fort practically overnight. It wasn't about brute force, it was about being clever, using unconventional strategies. This is literally how a peasant outsmarted the samurai elite. And then, in 1582, the unthinkable happens. Oda Nobunaga, the man who was this close to unifying Japan, is betrayed and killed by one of his own generals. Just like that, the country is thrown right back into total chaos. A massive power vacuum opens up. Now, while all the other generals were just reeling from the shock, Hideyoshi acted. How long did it take him to turn his whole army around, hunt down the assassin, and crush him in battle? 13 days. With that one incredibly fast and decisive move, he not only avenged his master, but perfectly positioned himself to be Nobunaga's true successor. Okay, so let's move on to the next chapter. Because this is where Hideyoshi stops being just a general and starts becoming the ruler of a unified nation. He's got a vision. After avenging Nobunaga, he still had a massive job ahead of him. I mean, look at this map. Japan was just a patchwork of all these different warring clans. So Hideyoshi used this brilliant mix of military force, smart alliances, and political games to bring every last one of them under his control. So once he had military control, he started to change the very fabric of Japanese society. And one of his most famous moves was this, the sword hunt of 1588. He ordered that all weapons be taken from anyone who wasn't a samurai. Now, this had 2 really important goals. First, stop any peasant revolts before they could start, and second, lock the class system in place for good. And this table here really shows you the impact. Before Hideyoshi, a peasant like him could become a warrior. It was possible. After him, that door was slammed shut. Society was frozen. Think about it. After 100 years of chaos where ambitious men were constantly rising up, Hideyoshi saw that very mobility as a threat. He was the one who separated warriors from farmers, moved the samurai into castle towns, took away the peasants' weapons, and tied them to the land. It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The man who climbed the ladder pulled it right up behind him. But there was one title he couldn't get, the big one, shogun, the supreme military leader. That was reserved for people with noble samurai blood. So what does he do? In a move of pure political genius, he gets himself adopted by a high-ranking noble family. This clever workaround let him bypass the whole warrior hierarchy and take the title of Kanpaku, or imperial regent, which made him the undisputed ruler of Japan anyway. But, like so many of these stories, this one takes a dark turn. The very things that made Hideyoshi great, his incredible ambition and unstoppable drive, well, they're the same things that would eventually lead to his downfall. By 1591, he'd done it. The impossible. After a full century of brutal civil war, Japan was finally at peace. It was all unified under his rule. This was the absolute peak of his power, everything he'd worked for his entire life. But Hideyoshi was not satisfied. It turns out that achieving peace wasn't enough for a man who was defined by constant struggle and ambition. He had conquered all of Japan, so now he started looking overseas. He launched 2 enormous invasions of Korea, and his ultimate goal was something that sounds almost crazy: the conquest of Ming China. Now, the campaign started off okay, but they very quickly got bogged down in a bloody, expensive stalemate. These wars just drained Japan's resources and cost so many lives, and they seriously damaged the reputation he had spent decades building. And at the very same time, his personal life was just spiraling into paranoia. His infant son and heir died, so he named his nephew as the next in line. But then, a new son was born. Suddenly, Hideyoshi saw his nephew as a rival to his new baby boy, and he turned on his own family. He forced his nephew to commit suicide, and then, in an absolutely horrifying act of cruelty, he had his nephew's entire family executed. We're talking 31 women and children. The great unifier had become a butcher. So how do we even begin to understand a man like this? What did he leave behind? Let's take a look at his really complex legacy. Hideyoshi died in 1598, with his army still stuck in Korea. And his last words to his most powerful lords weren't a command, but a plea. I depend upon you for everything. He knew the entire system was held together only by his own force of will. And he was absolutely right. The second he was gone, the whole thing fell apart. His great rival, the patient and cunning Tokugawa Ieyasu, seized power. It all ended at the siege of Osaka, where Hideyoshi's own son and heir was defeated and the Toyotomi clan was completely wiped out. And this right here, this is the core of his legacy. On one side, his son, the tragic end of his bloodline. On the other, Osaka Castle, a powerful symbol that's still standing today. So his family, his dynasty, it failed. But the nation he built, the social structures he put in place, those would shape Japan for the next 250 years. So we're left with this one big question. Was Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the little monkey, a brilliant unifier who ended a century of war and paved the way for a lasting peace? Or was he a ruthless tyrant whose own paranoia and ambition devoured his family and his legacy? Maybe, just maybe, the truth is a bit of both.